A millionaire thought a homeless man would poison his disabled daughter, but what he did shocked everyone. Matthew Sullivan, a powerful businessman, a man who controlled everything, markets, negotiations, the lives of others, everything except the life of his own daughter. The hospital corridors smelled of cleanliness, fear, and money. In that exact order. The white walls of the clinic in Zurich, where Matthew Sullivan kept an entire floor on call, were infinitely sterile. They absorbed not only dust, but also hope. The doctor left the room and nodded barely perceptibly. No change. The same indicators, the same forecasts. The girl was a dying candle, unable to be fanned even by the winds bought for millions. He didn't say it out loud, but Matthew didn't need words. He read faces better than any documents. This is what once made him the most influential investment strategist in North America. He knew the value of everything except one thing, his own helplessness. Aria was 7. She hadn't spoken for almost 2 years. Her nervous system was damaged, her immune system destroyed. Her body was like a lock whose doors no longer opened. He hired the best. He spent hundreds of thousands of euros a month. He flew with her to Boston, Israel, Japan, tried stem cells, neurostimulators, hyperbaric chambers. All in vain. Now she lay, as always, in her room. He sat by the window, watching the gardeners trim the hedges below. Everything was under control, everything according to schedule, and only in that mirror opposite him was a cold, empty gaze. When Matthew returned home to New York, he again tried to arrange everything scientifically. A new consultant from Europe, a new nutritionist, a new machine. Everything new, everything useless. And then one morning, walking along the alley to the house, he saw something strange. At the very edge of the garden, near the wall that marked the beginning of the vacant lot, a child was digging in the bushes. He was thin, wearing a worn jacket, and a backpack stood next to him. Matthew paused. The child didn't notice him and, like a thief, pulled a container with something warm from his bag. He slipped through a gap in the fence and disappeared behind the pavilion. Security appeared a couple of minutes later, but it was too late. The cameras recorded nothing. Only later that evening did Matthew realize where the boy had gone. "Who brought her this?" he asked the nurse, seeing a plate of rice and vegetables next to the bed. "I thought you asked for this." She suddenly wanted to eat. We were surprised, and Aria ate it all, and an hour later, for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The next morning, Matthew got up earlier than usual and hid in the pavilion. He didn't know what exactly he was looking for, but he knew that intuition, which he had despised all his life, was stronger than logic today, and it did not fail him. The boy came again. He was carrying food. This time, thick soup in an old thermos. He made his way carefully, as if he were in a strange temple rather than a mansion. When Matthew emerged from behind a column, the boy shuddered and started to run, but the man grabbed him by the shoulder. "Who are you?" he asked sharply. I'm Lucas. Forgive me, I'm not a thief." She was just crying. "I saw. And Grandma said she needed to be given food." "Your grandma?" "Estella. She knows. She heals people." Matthew let go of his hand. The name was familiar. Estella, the old woman who lived down the slope, where the houses of the poor neighborhoods still remained. There were rumors about her. Herbs, infusions, prayers. He always considered her part of folklore, some kind of living relic of the past. "You won't come here anymore," he said sternly. "This is private property," but he looked at the thermos. "What's in there?" "Chicken soup with arrowroot and guac. Grandma says it's for strength, not for the body, but for the heart." That evening, Matthew couldn't sleep for the first time, and Aria ate everything again, then fell asleep without a nap. He sat next to her, holding her hand and thinking, it can't be. Salvation can't begin beyond the pale of science. And the next day, he went down to where the earth smells of dampness and people live not by schedules, but by the moon and rain, to the house where the woman he'd always considered a nobody lived. Only now did he know she had something he didn't. And when the door opened and a gray-haired, cane-straight figure appeared on the threshold, Matthew, for the first time in his life, didn't know what to say. "You want to heal the body?" she said, without waiting for him to speak. "And I'm trying to heal the child." He didn't understand what exactly fluttered in his chest, but he understood that he had just entered the garden, where everything was real. The next time Lucas came, he was wearing a white Panama hat, in which he looked like a character from an old book. The hat was big and kept slipping down over his eyes. He walked towards the mansion as if this path was much more than just a path over a fence. He went to where they were waiting for him, where he could help. But this time, Matthew himself was already waiting for him at the gate. "You're stubborn," the man said. "That's good. I appreciate stubbornness when it leads to results." "I didn't know what you'd see," Lucas muttered, averting his gaze. "I just heard her crying in the garden. Then I just approached the fence, and suddenly, why did you decide that food would help her?" "It's not just food," Lucas said and straightened up. "This is what Grandma cooks when someone loses the taste for life. We had a neighbor, his wife died. He didn't talk to anyone, and Grandma gave him soup. And one day he left the house and started planting trees. She says, food is not just food, it's memory, it's touch. This is home." Matthew wanted to say that all these were naive fairy tales, that in the body there is chemistry, biology, statistics, but then he remembered. Statistics did not explain anything, and the girl after the meal for the first time asked not in words, but with a gesture to repeat. He led Lucas into the house. For the first time in a long time, Aria did not turn away. She even slightly raised herself in the pillows. Lucas handed her a bowl, carefully laying out the contents. Stewed beans with pumpkin, finely grated ginger root, and a little boiled banana. The girl took a spoon. Matthew could not believe his eyes. "She likes it," Lucas whispered. "Grandma says, in her body it's dark as a cave, and the food is supposed to become fire." "What do you even know about this?" Matthew asked sharply, unable to contain myself. "You're a child, and she's a doctor?" "She's not a doctor," the boy answered calmly. "She's just seen a lot of dying people and a lot of survivors. She knows how to listen." The man was silent. It was unbearable to feel the walls of confidence behind which he had hidden all his life crumbling. After dinner, Lucas left, promising to return the next day. Matthew stayed in his daughter's room and, for the first time in a long time, read her a story. He didn't know if she could hear, but her lips trembled. In the morning, Patricia called from Geneva. "I heard you were back in America again. What's going on with the new therapy?" "No one is answering me. I see the reports, but it's no use." "There is progress," he said evasively. "What progress? Did you hire someone new?" He fell silent. What could he say that his daughter was coming back to life after soup prepared by a woman without a medical education, without a white coat, without a license? "I'm in control, Patricia, not worry." She didn't believe it. He knew it from her tone, but he didn't argue. 2 days later, Lucas came again. He brought with him a tiny flower in a pot. "It's peperita, mint, but special. Grandma says that if you put it next to it, your dreams will be softer." "Dreams?" Matthew grinned. "Are you serious? How long has it been since you slept without nightmares?" The man didn't answer because he hadn't really slept for over a year. That evening, he went to Estella's house himself. The road there was short, but it seemed endless. A dusty path, the chirping of birds, the smells of damp earth. And finally, a wooden house, shaded by acacia. A voice came from the window. Someone was singing an old folk lullaby. He knocked. "I've been waiting for you," Estella said. "Come in." The house was clean, simple, and smelled homely of dried herbs. No medical equipment, only books, hanging bunches of leaves, jars, bowls, and a silence that made you want to breathe deeply. "I don't believe in miracles," he began. "But, my daughter, you believe in numbers," Estella nodded. "But it's not the numbers that hurt the child. Her soul wants to be noticed, to be loved, not treated." Those words were a blow, simple, precise. He couldn't push them away, because somewhere deep down he knew she was right. "What should I do?" "Start simple. Listen, eat with her. Don't read reports. Read to her. Don't control. Be there. I don't give guarantees, but I believe in love. And it is stronger than formulas." He was silent, and then asked, "Why do you help?" Estella smiled. "Because someone once helped me. Because if you save even one soul, you have not lived in vain." That evening he returned home a different person. He didn't know what he was doing, didn't understand where he was going, but for the first time in a long time he felt that he was not walking alone. Matthew couldn't say exactly when something began to change in him. It wasn't a sudden epiphany, but rather a vague, anxious whisper that grew louder over time. He wore expensive suits and still received reports from the London clinic. He still considered himself a man of power. But every evening he sat next to Aria and fed her a spoonful of thick soup from Estella, and each time something in her came to life. One day, the girl reached out to him, simply placed her hand on his. He froze. It was not a touch, it was forgiveness. Lucas began to come every day, sometimes with food, sometimes just like that. He brought hand-drawn cards with flowers and animals, played the harmonica, told how puppies were born in their yard. Aria listened, did not respond with words, but a depth appeared in her gaze that was previously absent. Have you ever been afraid of dying? Matthew once asked Lucas. The boy shrugged. I'm afraid of losing my grandmother, and dying is not so scary. It's scarier to be unwanted. The answer pierced him like a needle. He began visiting Estella more often. At first, he sat on the edge of the bench, silent, observing, then began asking questions, then helping. For the first time in his life, he peeled the arrowroot himself, washed the chamomile, and dried lemon balm in the sun. He, accustomed to negotiations and skyscrapers, now knelt in the garden, leveling the earth. You're not saving your daughter, Estella said one day, watching him. You learn to be close to her, and that's all there is to salvation. He nodded wordlessly. He began coming without a reason, just to sit on her veranda, drink guava leaf tea, listen to the silence in which his heart finally began to hear. One day, he saw a withered bush in the corner of the garden. What's wrong with it? He's been in the shadows for too long, Estella replied. Without the sun, everything dies, even those who live. He looked at her and realized she, too, had been in the shadows for too long. In the shadow of his control, his money, his decisions. That same day, he ordered the back garden to be opened. There used to be a helicopter pad there. Now he ordered the concrete to be removed, the soil to be turned over, and greenery to be planted. He wanted his daughter to be able to breathe in the present. This is stupid, Patricia said when she heard. You're building a village in your house. It's ridiculous and dangerous. If she dies, the press will trample you. And if she survives? He asked. Because of some old woman and soup. Wake up. You'll lose everything. Your reputation, your contracts. I'll take your daughter away from you. And you never had her, he said calmly. She's not a project, she's a person. Patricia filed a lawsuit, got journalists involved. The calls, articles, leaks began. Billionaire, he entrusted his daughter's health to a witch. A new scandal in the Sullivan family. His partners distanced themselves. One of the funds he managed suspended operations. He sat in the garden next to Aria and thought, everything is crumbling. Everything he built. And at that moment, the girl made a movement. A slight turn of her head, a gaze straight into his eyes, long, meaningful. Then she sat up and lightly touched a leaf on a nearby bush. It was her first independent gesture since the onset of her illness. He didn't scream. He simply cried silently, restrainedly, but inside it was as if a dam had burst. Later, he asked Estella, is this the beginning of recovery? This is the beginning of a return. She's here with you now, and from now on it's not up to us to decide. He spent more and more time in the garden. He put aside his work, turned off his phone, read to his daughter, planted mint, and taught Lucas how to arrange dried leaves in the correct proportions. He, a man of rationality, now respected the unprovable. Estella once said, everything you do must grow, and therefore live. There was a lot of deadness in you, and now you're coming alive with her. He didn't argue. He knew that everything he'd previously considered important was now just background. And in the center was a little girl, sitting on a blanket and trying to take a step for the first time in a long time. The first truly warm days had come to Matthew's house unnoticed. The garden, once strict and neat, was now a colorful mess. Mint grew along the paths, lemon balm took over the flower beds. Guaca bushes reached for the sun. All of this irritated Patricia. You don't care about safety, she shouted the day she came to visit her daughter. Where's the sterility? Where's the hygiene? She's sitting on the ground, next to the bees, with a boy you never even checked. For the first time in 2 years, she got up on her own and took a step. Eduardo answered quietly. You want to lose her completely, then lose one. I'm filing the papers. The court will determine which of us can be trusted. And she did file. The trial began a week later. Everything moved quickly. Patricia had connections. The right newspapers, the right lawyers, the right headlines. An eccentric father, a billionaire who refused medicine, a shaman instead of a clinic. Public opinion wavered, but most sympathized with the normal mother. The court hearings were a formality. The psychologist hired by Patricia called Matthew's behavior unstable. His attempts to explain that Aria was eating, smiling, walking were irrelevant. There was no medical evidence. At one hearing, the judge asked point-blank, "Mr. Sullivan, do you really think that soup and herbs and songs around the campfire are a substitute for treatment?" "No," he replied. "I believe it is a substitute for loneliness, and loneliness kills faster than illness." It made the newspapers. Some laughed, some paused, but the decision seemed inevitable. At that moment, Aria began to speak. First one word, then two. She spoke quietly, with effort, but these were the most ordinary words. "Dad, Lucas, more milk, then sleep, flower mom." They recorded a video, but the court rejected it. An inconclusive one could have been filmed in advance. Patricia insisted that it was an old recording, that it was manipulated, that the girl was being drugged with something. She even called a toxicologist. Then Estella entered the courtroom. She didn't want to, but she came. "I'm not a doctor," she said. "I don't have a degree, but I've been to more funerals than any of you, and more miracles than you have ever seen. I don't heal with my body, I live nearby. And he," she nodded at Matthew, "is doing the same for the first time." The pause was heavy. The judge sighed. It's not something that can be recorded in a report, but it's significant in human terms. The decision was made 2 days later. Matthew wasn't stripped of custody, but he was placed under strict supervision. Social workers, reports, medical examinations, a temporary ban on independent treatment. Translated from legal language, this meant, one more step and you'll lose. He sat in the garden while Aria slept in the hammock. Lucas was nearby, storing dried herbs in a box. "Do you regret it?" the boy asked. "No," Aria replied. "I regret not understanding earlier how little strength means when you're alone. Grandma says, adults are afraid to be weak, because then they need to truly love." He nodded. Then he rose slowly, heavily, but confidently. "I haven't lost. I'm just starting, and I'll start with what I can do, not just for her." He began writing at night, drafting a charter, looking for people. He couldn't yet win the case, but he could create an alternative for other parents, equally lost, for children who had already been written off. He called it the Aria Foundation. His idea was simple: free help to families whose children found themselves on the fringes of the medical system, not as a replacement for hospitals, but as a complement, so that no one would be left alone, so that at least someone would come and sit with them. "It's utopia," the former partners said. "Is this marketing?" the journalists asked. "It's me," he replied, "the real thing." Aria walked out into the garden on her own. Not in a stroller, not in a nurse's arms, not under the supervision of a physiotherapist. She simply walked out in a light dress, with her hair in a thin braid, holding onto the wall of the house with one hand. She took her time, moving carefully, as if learning how to be. Matthew froze on the porch. His heart pounded as if he were back in a courtroom or negotiating with an international investor. But now the stakes were much higher. "Dad?" she said, clearly, and smiled. He didn't answer, just knelt down and opened his arms. She walked slowly and hugged him. It wasn't a gesture, it was a vow. The Aria Foundation began working modestly. One office, one coordinator, one doctor, and one herbalist. Yes, Estella agreed unofficially, not as a specialist in herbal medicine, but as a person who could sit next to her. She didn't have a workbook, but she had a gift and hearts that felt it. Lucas began to come every day after school, help package herbs, keep a list of requests, draw leaflets. He wore a badge that said, Assistant Coordinator. But everyone knew he was the son Matthew once found behind a fence, or, conversely, the son who found him. At first, the media ridiculed the foundation, but after 6 months, hundreds of people began to contact it. Those who were told, nothing can be done. Those who lived between hope and tired, they came for a word, for soup, for what is so lacking in official medicine, a person who is simply nearby. Matthew no longer lived in the mansion. He sold it, leaving only a section of the garden. Now there was a pavilion not of glass and marble, but of wood with open windows, where children could sleep on blankets, listen to fairy tales, eat food from Estella. He lived modestly, without security, without a driver, without haute couture suits. "Are you still a businessman?" an old partner once asked him, looking in out of curiosity. "No," he answered. I am a father and a student, my best teacher, an 8-year-old girl who one day learned to look into your eyes again. You lost everything. I found everything. One day he took Aria into the garden. Where Lucas once squeezed through a gap in the fence, a huge tangerine bush now grew. The girl reached out to him, plucked one fruit, and gave him this for you. Thank you, he said, noticing Estella standing next to him. She gave you back not only a taste for life, she said, but also the ability to feel it. He nodded. I thought I could buy everything. It turned out I could only give it away. She smiled, then said, when I die, don't think of me as a healer. Just plant trees and listen to your daughter. The foundation grew slowly but surely. People came from other cities, came without hope, and left with her, not because Estella had healed someone, but because they were suddenly no longer alone. And Aria walked again, sometimes quickly, sometimes stumbling. She still didn't say much, but her eyes were full of life. Sometimes she took Lucas's hand, and they walked through the garden like brother and sister. Sometimes she sat on the veranda and weaved wreaths from leaves. And Matthew, he was no longer a hero, nor a millionaire, nor a genius strategist. He simply lived, breathed, listened, and helped. And every time a new family with a sick child came to the garden, he was the first to greet them. Welcome, he said. We don't treat people here. We live here. We're all here. On the last day of spring, early in the morning, he saw Aria approach a small bush in the corner of the garden, the first one he had planted himself. She sat down next to him and whispered, Rusty, you're sorely needed. And he understood that everything that needed saving had already been saved.